Hi, my angels, and welcome back to another video. Now, today's video is really for anyone who feels like they just need a reset. So, I don't care if you've been manifesting for years, months, weeks, or you literally just found this stuff. When manifestation starts to feel heavy or stressful, that's usually because you have drifted away from the basics. And that's one of my favorite things to do is go back to the basics. Now, it's very easy because sometimes we get lost in techniques, we get lost in these timelines, or we get lost in these checking, fixing, and proving cycles. And when that happens, going back to the foundation is actually the most powerful thing that you can do because this is going to bring you back into trust and it makes this feel very light again. And it really reminds you that this was never meant to feel like work. Now, since it is Black History Month, I wanted this reset to be very intentional because what a lot of us now call the law of assumption actually has a real lineage. Now, honoring that lineage matters because before Neville Goddard ever lectured publicly, so this is before any of the books, this is before all of these techniques were packaged and modernized into so many different forms, Neville was a student. And the person who taught him the law of assumption was a man named Abdullah. Now, every single thing that we currently know about Abdullah comes directly from Neville's very own lectures and writings. Now, Neville described Abdullah as an Ethiopian rabbi who taught metaphysical interpretations of scripture in New York around the late 1920s and early 1930s. Now, this really matters because during this time, this was whenever Black spiritual authority was often erased or minimized, and Abdullah was teaching something very radical in this time period. He was teaching people how to handle this inner sovereignty, how to have authorship over self, and consciousness as a basic law. Now, the big thing that I really want to highlight was Neville never hid that this was where the teaching came from. And he didn't describe Abdullah as symbolic or mystical in some abstract way. He talked about him as a real teacher, a mentor. This was someone who corrected him, someone who trained him, and genuinely taught him everything that he later turned into the law of assumption. Now, the thing that stands out most in Neville's stories is that Abdullah would not compromise the law for comfort. He never allowed Neville to speak from lack. He never entertained any of his explanations, and he never discussed the how. Because the biggest thing that he really understood deeply is that consciousness does not ever negotiate, which I think is very, very, very powerful when you really understand the law behind that. Because Abdullah taught Neville that you are always assuming something. Now, whatever you assume to be true, consciousness is going to accept that as reality. That's it. So that really became the foundation of what Neville later on taught as the law of assumption. And his famous quote comes, "There is no one to change but self." Because Abdullah really taught that nothing outside of you has creative power. Because circumstances do not create consciousness, consciousness creates circumstances. And honestly, to me, that is very relieving because it means you don't have to fix the world. You don't have to try and control people, and you're not sitting here trying to force these outcomes. All you have to do is simply shift internally, and then reality is able to follow. Now, Abdullah trained Neville to understand that there are different states of consciousness. Now, a state is just who you are being and what feels normal to you. So, this is whatever that you are accepting internally as true. Now, Neville later said, "Man moves in a world that is nothing more than his own consciousness objectified." Because you don't manifest what you want, you are always simply manifesting whatever it is that you have identified with. Now, this is one of my favorite stories and one of the most famous stories that I feel is the most well known of Neville, which he shared about Abdullah. Now, Neville really wanted to travel to Barbados to see his family. He had no money, no ticket, and absolutely no logical way for this to actually happen. Now, when he came to Abdullah and was explaining this to him, he just said one sentence: "You are in Barbados." Now, immediately, Neville starts explaining, exactly why this just would not be possible for him. And Abdullah stopped him and he said, "Who said you are going? You are in Barbados." And he would slam the door in his face. Now, Neville later said that if he kept speaking from lack, that Abdullah would literally end the conversation every single time by slamming the door in his face. And this is exactly what I think he wanted us to take from it. Was he wasn't being unkind. It was because that is how dominant he was in his refusal to resonate with the old state. So after this took place, weeks later, Neville received a letter from his family with the money inside. He traveled first class to Barbados, and Neville was really clear about this, is that it didn't happen because he tried harder. It genuinely happened because he stopped arguing with any opposing assumptions. Now, Abdullah never taught manifestation as effort. He didn't teach it as this emotional hype, and he didn't teach by forcing this belief. He taught the identity. And this is why manifestation is actually so simple, because you don't need more techniques or more affirmations or the perfect wording for your subconscious to get it. You don't need to keep chasing this proof that is outside of yourself. You just simply need to decide who you are and what it is that you are getting, and remain loyal to that state and to that decision, and truly allow reality to rearrange itself. Now, while Neville went on to teach this publicly and write extensively, other teachers used different languages. But Neville never hid where his teachings came from, and he always named Abdullah. He honored him, he gave him the credit that was due. So I feel this is important, especially during Black History Month, that recognition matters, because really honoring lineage brings us back to integrity, and it's going to bring us back to simplicity. So I really want this video to allow you to let this be your reset, because manifestation was never meant to feel heavy, and it's not something that you're ever doing wrong. It's just simply asking you to come back home to who you are being. So I want you to take this message and enjoy this reminder. Really close the door to anything that has any relevance to the old story. Just simply slam it in its face and allow your reality to follow. So I know this video was short and sweet. I just wanted to come on here and allow you to come back home to your roots, come back home to yourself, and remember, this is truly so simple. So until next time, my angels.